3rd.
Mark Hendricks, only on Coin 6 News. People you know.
Today on Face the Nation, author Tom Wolfe, biologist Stephen Jay Gould, internet expert Esther Dyson, and ethicist Stephen Carter talk about the millennium. 5 more days to the millennium. What will it bring? How will people change and evolve? We'll ask the noted scientist Stephen Jay Gould. What role will art play? Will people read books anymore? We'll ask Tom Wolfe, author most recently of A Man in Full. Will the internet, which grows more pervasive almost daily, bring us together or pull us apart? We'll ask cyber guru Esther Dyson. And finally, what's in store for American society? What are the most pressing challenges for us as the new century begins? We'll ask ethicist and law professor Stephen Carter. Then I'll have a final word on all of this. But first, heading into a new millennium on Face the Nation.
Face the Nation with CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Bob Schieffer. And now from CBS News in New York, Bob Schieffer.
And hello again, and we're in New York because our guests are here, and what a panel we have this morning. Author Tom Wolfe, internet expert Esther Dyson, ethicist Stephen Carter, and evolutionary biologist Stephen Jay Gould. Gentlemen, thank you, and lady, for being with us today. This should be a lot of fun because I want to talk a little bit about the century we've just come through and what might be ahead. When I think of the 20th century, Tom Wolfe, I think of heroes. I think of great leaders, Roosevelt, Churchill, Martin Luther King. In other countries, for example, Mandela, Lech Walesa. Did the century make the people, or did the people make the century?
I personally am very pleased that we have so few heroes now, because practically all national heroes in every country, certainly in this country, come out of wars. I mean, Lincoln would not have been he's like Hercules. Without his ordeals, Hercules would not have been Hercules. Lincoln would not have been Lincoln without the Civil War. And I remember when John Glenn went up into space, he was considered a warrior who was challenging the Russians in the heavens. And when he came back to Earth through New York City here, there were policemen crying, tears running down their cheeks in the intersections at this protector who had arrived in our midst. Neil Armstrong went to the moon. He was considered a brave man who did a great technological feat, achieved a great feat, but he was not considered a hero. I like the fact that we don't have many heroes now.
Tom Wolfe says that wars create heroes. Stephen Carter, you know, I must say, ever since I watched Saving Private Ryan, I've been thinking about it ever since. Would Americans today do what those people did on D-Day?
I don't think there's any way to tell. What I worry about is that we need, if we ever were to do something like that, visionary, inspiring leaders who could get us to do it. What worries me about the path of America as we end this century and head for the next one is that we as a people seem less and less willing to sacrifice, to give of ourselves, to do something hard, and our leaders seem scared to ask us to do that. So when you think of the great leaders of the century, you mentioned the Roosevelts, the Churchills, and the Martin Luther Kings, what they had in common was calling people to a vision of something difficult to do that would be costly and yet was necessary. And unfortunately, we do have wars, but we fight them differently. America today sees many causes in the world worth killing for, just doesn't see any causes worth dying for.
Well, you know, that's an interesting point. And what do you suppose happened? Do you think there are too many polls, that these leaders in those days didn't have all these polls and all these ways to survey public opinion? They just had to sort of go on instinct.
I'm not a media basher, but I do think television tends to make people smaller, make leaders smaller. I'm not talking about investigating scandals or something like that. It's the constant exposure. When you see someone over and over again, it's much easier, I think, to say this is just a politician. And maybe if Roosevelt had been on television all the time, if Lincoln had been on television all the time, would have said just a politician. This is just whatever it is he wants us to do is just a cover for some other scheme or something. It would have been as cynical then as perhaps now.
I see you shaking your head, Stephen.
I was just thinking that William Jennings Bryan could give the Cross of Gold speech identically at every railroad crossing in America and make it sound original. If every word is subject to scrutiny, no one can be brilliant all the time.
Well, are our leaders becoming too familiar?
Well, they're too familiar, and at the same time, there's a word I was thinking about that I haven't heard anywhere lately, and that word is courage. Not just physical courage, but moral courage, the courage to tell the truth, the courage to say, you've got to sacrifice to get something done. Right now, yeah, it's polls, it's television, it's markets, it's risk management. Let's assess our risk, let's look at our reward. There's no sense of let's do what's right, let's call on people. Courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do it anyway because you want to achieve something.
Well, Esther, you're the expert here on the thing we're all going to have to be confounded with or confronted with, and that is the Internet. Is it going to bring us closer together, or will it drive us further apart?
It's going to do both, ironically. It's like any other very powerful tool. It all depends on how you use it. And so it can bring the world closer together, but you can also use it to avoid human contact. And so it means the choices that we make with this tool really matter.
It seems to me, though, Tom Wolfe, that it's more than just a tool. I mean, I take your point that it is a tool, but it seems to me that it's something more than that.
Well, I was struck in Esther's book, her last two books, that Esther goes to great lengths to point out that this is not something that's changing human nature. It's changing the ways that humans can operate, but it's not changing human nature. There are so many futurists now who, Danny Hillis, for example, the man who is credited with developing these massively parallel computers and so on, he says we are in a new type of evolution. Instead of taking centuries and eons, this evolution takes nanoseconds. And he presents a picture of the human beast changing electronically overnight into something totally different. I mean, I don't see that. I see the Internet is fabulous for disseminating and retrieving information. That's not a small thing, but it's quite different from saying the beast is now wired in some totally new way.
Stephen Gould, you're the evolutionist here. You're the one that studies changes in the human species. Is the human species changing? Did it change during this century? Will it change in the next?
Tom is absolutely right. Darwinian evolution, even at its most rapid rate, is so slow that compared to the tumultuous speed of human cultural change, it just can't have any effect upon human historical or cultural change. Evolution made us the creature that we are, gave us that human nature, which the Internet doesn't alter. But, you know, human brain and body size hasn't changed in 50,000 years at least. The people who painted the great caves at Chauvet 30,000 years ago are us. Everything that we call civilization we have done with the same biological equipment, which is indeed very well suited to all these achievements. The irony is that with genetic engineering, which is essentially a form of cultural feedback and discovery, we now for the first time have the power, which I hope we won't use extensively, of producing a true biological alteration, but there has been no biological change in humanity during the whole of our historical period.
What about this whole business of genetic engineering? There's a story in the paper this week about injecting jellyfish genes into the embryo of a monkey, the idea being eventually to create a monkey, as I understand it. These are going to be enormous questions, it seems to me, Steve.
What's striking about both what Steve said and what Esther said in your question is that lurking behind all that is the sense that we have these enormously powerful tools. We're human beings who make moral choices, and the question for the future is going to be, where will the wisdom come from for us as a species to decide how to use these things? I don't think we can assume that simply because we haven't changed as beings, that somehow we will know how to choose wisely. One reason it's good to have people thinking about this is that we need advice, we need thought. The problem with the speed of change is we can hardly assimilate into our moral sense one new technology before we're confronted with another. And what worries me a lot about some of the technological change, and I'm not anti-technology at all, but the way that so many adults seem to be throwing up their hands and saying, well, it's too fast for me, I'm ready to die. I hear people say things like this all the time. And even if they only mean it figuratively, the sense that people have being bewildered, of the world spinning beyond their control, is frightening for a democracy that relies on participation and real confidence in order to function.
You know, and this is something that has concerned me for a long time, and that is the way we have compressed the amount of time we need to make decisions. I think of it just in the news cycles. It used to be that the mayor would say something in the afternoon paper, and then the city councilman who's on the other side of the issue would come about, and then he'd give his side of it in the morning paper. You had at least 10 hours. People did have a little time to sort of think about it. But now, if both sides don't get their side out in the same newscast, it's just lost in this great information maw. Does it worry you that we don't have enough time to think anymore, Tom?
It does. I was thinking about, I'm intrigued by Thomas Jefferson. And I read in this wonderful, Dumas' wonderful biography of Jefferson, he used to wake at dawn every day. And he would, from dawn until breakfast, no matter what time of year he woke at dawn until breakfast, he'd do his correspondence from the day before. And then he, after breakfast, after a big farm breakfast, he would do the most important task he had to do that day and so on. And I started thinking, well, suppose he's alive today. He'd wake up at dawn, and there on the internet, he'd have 180 messages. And the protocol is you have to answer all these messages. And a good half of them would be jokes. That's what I get. And I get jokes from all over the place.
But you don't need to answer them.
Or you don't need to be on email at all, which is my solution at the moment.
You're a wise man. and you know, Jefferson wouldn't get anything done. Because he was scrupulous, and he'd answer all this stuff. It is a real problem. But you know, there's another piece of technology that I think continues. It has been through the 20th century and into the 21st. The most important piece of technology has ever struck mankind. And Stephen gets down to this in civility. It's the invention by Gottlieb Daimler in 1885 of the high-speed, small, internal combustion engine, which made possible the automobile. And the automobile has enabled us all to explode our communities. I mean, you know, my family's a good example. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. My parents both grew up in Virginia in rural areas. I'm living in New York City. My sister's down in North Carolina. My nieces and nephews are as far away as Bellingham, Washington. And it's the car, and the internal combustion engine also runs the airplane, that enables us to do this. And I think it removes a lot of the constraints we used to have when we were in agricultural societies. You know, you don't have, in an agricultural society, when 100 years ago this country was 80% people lived on farms, you don't have casual insults. There may be insults and people write novels about them. Gogol wrote whole novels about rural insults. But you don't have casual insults. The other thing, to the distress of my children, I have a 1996 Buick Roadmaster station wagon. It's enormous. And my wife is always accusing me of straddling lanes. So I was driving down the street, and I probably was straddling the lane. This car is beeping this horn behind me. So first chance I had, I move over to the right, and I see who this is. This car comes up. Here's this beautiful young woman in a silver BMW. And so I kind of looked at her, and sort of apologized. I'm sorry. She looks to me a couple of beats, and then she says, "Eat muck, you old crock." The word wasn't muck, though.
We figured that.
And knowing that she never had to deal with me again. I mean, there was absolutely no downside for her. Her car's faster than mine, even if I wanted to do something about it. And so you couldn't do that 100 years ago. You couldn't live that way.
Let's take a little break here, and we'll come back and talk about all this some more. Just about.
This portion of Face the Nation is sponsored by DLJ Direct, a Donaldson, Lufkin, and Jenrette company, putting our reputation online. And by Agilent Technologies, dreams made real.
I just hope it's healthy.
I hope they're playing land safely.
I don't want to go to the hospital anymore. I
wish I could get my email out.
I wish my network had more bandwidth.
I hope we get 1 million hits.
never stay out of here.
I wish I could have done more.
I wish I had more time.
Agilent Technologies. Dreams made real.
What do you get when you combine the expertise of an investment bank that's been on Wall Street for 40 years with the speed of the internet? The best of both worlds. Welcome to DLJ Direct, an online brokerage designed to give investors the tools they need to make serious investment decisions. DLJ Direct will change your expectations of online brokers.
Donaldson, Lufkin, and Jenrette, putting our reputation online.
I was one hurting cowboy. Heartburn hotter than a blown engine. And pain? The antacid I took didn't do the whole job. And Pepsi takes so long. Then I tried Alka-Seltzer. Man, if it didn't work a whole lot better.
Alka-Seltzer, the only one with the medicines to relieve all your symptoms.
Boy, it works fast.
And only Alka-Seltzer has the effervescent power to speed relief.
Alka-Seltzer. Made a believer out of me.
Get better relief. Get Alka-Seltzer.
And we're back now with our panel. Stephen Gould, does it surprise you that as we come to the end of this century, which has been a century of remarkable progress, I think by any definition, that suddenly we have in the United States an argument over creationism?